In case you missed it this weekend, Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart and several other Georgia Bulldogs participated in the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. And during the media session, a media group called Chat Us Up went up to Jackson Dart and asked him, what was the most difficult place that you had to play in during your time at Ole Miss? Now, this is going to trigger a lot of LSU fans. So if you're watching, close your ears. But this is what Jackson Dart had to say. He said, quote, "One that definitely stands out is Death Valley at night. College Station is incredible, but the best atmosphere that I've played in was in Athens, Georgia. It was their 2023 senior night, Brock Bowers' return game. It was electric." Now, if you're watching this video, I mean, you obviously remember this game. It happened in 2023 towards the end of the season. Georgia beat number 9 Ole Miss 52-17, just absolutely waxed them. In fact, Ole Miss, I believe, got off to a 7-0 early start in that game, and then Georgia just took over, beat their brains in. And again, that was a good Ole Miss team. They were a top 10 team in the country, and Jackson Dart had his struggles. He just threw for 112 yards and 1 interception, according to my notes. But it goes back to the point. It is so tough to beat Georgia in Sanford Stadium. Now, they certainly had their struggles last year, and I'm going to talk about that for a second, but quickly, we're going to go down memory lane. But as far as that game goes, Georgia was clearly the better team. They beat Ole Miss 10 out of 10 times in Athens, Georgia that year. I mean, as we saw, right? Georgia probably beats that Ole Miss team in Oxford, but they had no shot of beating Georgia in Athens, mainly because they were just better. They were the better team. But that atmosphere was crazy. It was electric. And that's what Georgia fans need to do. They need to bring that energy when Texas comes to town, right? When Alabama comes to town, Ole Miss comes back to town. They can take the week off when Kentucky comes to town, right? You don't necessarily need to be loud when the Wildcats are coming to town. But there's going to be several home games where Georgia fans need that type of energy because, I mean, one of the best quarterbacks in college football ended his career and said, hey, it was more difficult playing in Athens at night than it was at LSU at night. And I believe they won that game at LSU, but they had no shot at all at beating Georgia in 2023. And the crowd did make a difference. And we've seen them make a difference a lot in the past. Again, Georgia hasn't lost a night game. They haven't lost a home game since 2019. And that was just a bad team. Yeah, Jake Fromm throwing interceptions left and right. Tyler Simmons dropping passes left and right. Rodrigo Blankenship missing critical field goals. That had nothing to do with the crowd. The crowd was stunned and they were quiet because of how bad the team was playing. At the end of the day, when Sanford Stadium is at its best, hard to find a better place in college football to watch a game. And it's tougher to find a place that's more difficult to play in at night when the crowd is rocking. Unfortunately, it's not always rocking. It's not always that consistent. And we're going to go over some games recently, but when Missouri came to town, I guess it was in 2023 as well, crowd wasn't super into it. Georgia Tech last year, the crowd was stunned. They were not into it. Even from the beginning, they were halfway into it, but everyone just thought Georgia was just going to roll over Georgia Tech in Athens, Black Friday night game. The environment was great, but the crowd necessarily wasn't. And I'm going to give them a break for a second because it's hard to stay loud and chaotic and energized when you get off to a slow start and when the team you're pulling for is getting run through, right? The crowd can't stop a run game. And if you're running through teams left and right, it's hard to keep the crowd into it. And I'll say this, if you're one of the Georgia fans who left that game early, I don't even care if this is mean. You should not be back for a home game in 2025. You should not be able to go to Sanford Stadium to watch Texas come to town or Alabama or Ole Miss. If you quit on the team and left that game early, because there were so many of them, hundreds of Georgia fans left the Georgia Tech game early and they missed what might be the greatest Georgia Tech game of all time, 8 overtime thriller. A lot of Georgia fans gave up. They shouldn't be back. Can't have that energy next fall when they might have the best home schedule in Georgia football program history. But let's talk about some of the great games, right? Even dating back to 2021, right? When this run really started. I mean, you could kind of say it started in 2017. That's when the program changed once and for all. But in 2021, I mean, that was the national championship team. And Georgia took another step forward as a program that year. They beat number 8 Arkansas 37-0, just blanked them, beat their brains in, sent them packing to Fayetteville. They wanted to give up at halftime, and the crowd was electric. That Arkansas offense couldn't do anything. They couldn't hear. They were going backwards nonstop from beginning to end. That crowd was 5-star. They beat number 11 Kentucky 30-13. And again, I think it was a pretty decent environment. I believe that game was at night, and Georgia just beat their brains in. The fans didn't have to be at their very best. Again, it's Kentucky. 2022, that was an all-timer against Tennessee. Number 1 ranked Tennessee, number 1 ranked offense. Hendon Hooker, all those cats coming into Sanford Stadium, and Georgia drilled them, and the crowd 100% made an impact. The Georgia crowd in that game made more of an impact on the Tennessee offense than any crowd in Neyland Stadium that I've been covering since 2017 has made an impact. Georgia's offense has not had a problem going up to Knoxville and putting up points. Tennessee does struggle and has struggled every time they've come to Athens since 2018. The crowd is a major factor. When Tennessee comes to town, Georgia steps it up, mainly because Tennessee was number 1 coming to town in 2022. And again, the crowd, Tennessee couldn't do anything because of that crowd. And then they came to town last year, number 7, and Georgia, once again, beat them by double digits. That's what they do to Tennessee, right? In 2023, number 20, Kentucky. Georgia, again, crushed them. That was 51-13. And then number 12, Ole Miss, 30-21. That was the Nazir Stackhouse interception late in the ball game, the field goal to put them up for good. The crowd was a little nervous in that game, and I get it. Every crowd can be nervous when they go down, and especially at a place like Georgia where, they've seen, for years, Georgia just crush teams, especially at home. Game's over at the halftime, right? It was year after year of that type of stuff. So when it's close against South Carolina, like it was, even though South Carolina wasn't ranked, I believe it was in 2023, that was a close one. Spencer Rattler came out and put points on the board early. I think Georgia was losing at the half. Sanford Stadium was quiet. Very quiet. They were quiet against Georgia Tech last year, but they turned it on more and more, especially in overtime. So I'll give Georgia fans credit for that. But they've got to be more consistent, because when they're at their best, it's hard for anyone to come into Athens and not only win, but to put up points. Other games over the years, 2019 Notre Dame, absolutely electric. One of the best atmospheres you will ever find in college football. 2017 Mississippi State, place was going bonkers. 2018 Auburn, even dating back to the Rick days. 2004 LSU, I was there as a young high school kid, went there with my dad. I don't think I have heard a stadium that loud. My ears were ringing. It felt like for weeks. 2014, when LSU came back to town, the Aaron Murray, Zach Mettenberger game, wild shootout. The fans were electric. 2014 Clemson, the blackout, 2007 Auburn. So there are instances and there are times when the crowd and the atmosphere can really take over and help Georgia win a ball game. And up until a few years ago, Sanford Stadium was looked at as this place where anyone can go in and win. It's not super intimidating. They don't have the best home record, yada, yada, yada. Things have changed. And when it matters most, when big, highly ranked teams come between the hedges, the Georgia fans, for the most part, just about every time, really show up and create an outstanding elite environment. And that's what they have to do again. And if the Georgia fans bring the same type of energy for Texas and Ole Miss, in Alabama, and when Tennessee and Auburn come back to Athens in a couple years or whenever it is, they should be playing Auburn every year. I don't know about Tennessee, but if they bring that energy, who knows? They can win all of them, all right? That's how much the Georgia fans in that environment can impact a game. We've seen it time after time, and Jackson Dart said at the end of his Ole Miss career, hey, the toughest environment I've played in was in Athens, Georgia, for that Brock Bowers return game. Of course, that was a game where, and that helped too. Everyone didn't really know if Brock Bowers was going to play. Of course, all of you knew, and everyone on Dawg Post knew, because we reported it early that week that Brock Bowers was going to play. Not only did he play, he scored a touchdown. Place went nuts, and Jackson Dart couldn't do much of anything. And he'll probably remember that game for the rest of his life. And we'll see if Arch Manning will remember next year's game in Athens for the rest of his life. But got to be just a little more consistent. And again, if you left that Georgia Tech game early, I'm sorry. I'm a mean guy. You can call me awful. You can call me mean. You shouldn't be allowed back for a full calendar year. Can't do it. Can't give up on the team because the game wasn't over. Anyway, again, the Georgia fans really stepped it up in overtime, and I do think helped Georgia win that game when it mattered most. But it's hard to be loud and consistent when the team isn't playing well. I get that, and we'll see. Georgia should have a pretty good team next year, but they're going to need the crowd. They're going to need that environment when they play those massive, massive home games next fall. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. But apparently Jackson Dart thinks that it was tougher to play in Athens than it was in Death Valley. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you over on Dawg Post.